Hello and welcome to the Environmental Film Festival in the nation's capital. This is a panel on the new frontier of climate change storytelling. My name is Kat Cizek and I'm coming to you from Tekaronto on the shores of Guantanamo, the dish with one spoon territory. I'm the artistic director of the co-creation studio at MIT Open Documentary Lab, and we are dedicated to collective creation as an alternative to singular authorship. We consider co-creation within communities, across disciplines, and even with algorithms. It's really my honor to moderate this panel today with an incredible group of esteemed guests and to talk about how we deal with the climate crisis and how we need to do that with co-creation. Just today, scientists have revealed that the Amazon rainforest is at a tipping point. It is looming much sooner than previously thought. It's reported in The Guardian. Analysis of satellite observations show forest is losing stability with profound global implications. This is very much in line with recent studies in Greenland ice sheet, along with the collapse of the Gulf Stream. We have such incredible technologies now to document the impact of climate change and our own destruction. So too, we have incredible technologies to mobilize humanity to act and to act now. And some of this most innovative work in climate justice is actually happening not on our movie screens, but in the realm of virtual reality, augmented reality, and multiplayer gaming. It's here where people formerly known as the audience are being transformed into active participants, where creators are hoping that the immersive affordances of these new technologies will generate new relations with our environment, with each other, and will transform how we engage with the most urgent issue of our time. I'm really honored to moderate this panel with Nani de la Pena, co-director of Greenland Melting, Winslow Porter and Milica Zek, both co-directors of The Tree, as well as Vanessa Keith, creator of 2100 of Dystopian Utopia, the city after climate change. Welcome to you all. We're going to get started with this panel by just going around and learning a little bit more about each of your projects. We'll see some visual clips just to give a sense of the incredible visual elegance and creativity that you've brought to these projects, along with the emotional impact and the technological innovation associated with each of them. We're going to start with Greenland Melting, which amongst many other accolades was one of the first VR pieces to compete at the Venice Film Festival in 2017. Nani, for those new to her work, has been called the godmother of VR by Forbes magazine. She is a renowned journalist, documentary filmmaker, entrepreneur. She's the founder and CEO of Emblematic Group, a digital media company focused on immersive, virtual, mixed, and augmented reality. Nani, really great to have you here, and tell us about this piece, Greenland Melting.
Yeah, and just before we get started, I have a new hat as well, which is I've taken a new position at Arizona State University for a new center on narrative and emerging media in downtown Los Angeles. So if people are interested in getting involved in this kind of technologies, they can also reach out to me for that. But Greenland Melting, you know, it's amazing to have made that film just a few years ago and to see everything that the scientists were worried about coming true in spades. The project followed to NASA researchers as they tried to understand more clearly why were glaciers melting at a speed that has been accelerating. And they shouldn't have been melting just from the temperatures above the sea. So they started to wonder, could it be the fact that the oceans were warming and were melting the glaciers from below? So they began to do this extraordinary research, and we were lucky enough to kind of tag along as they were doing the work. So, you know, the extraordinary result was, well, there were two things really. The first is that indeed, unfortunately, the waters have been warming underneath, and the results of the study that we tracked did show that, you know, if you put an ice cube in a water glass, it'll melt a lot faster than if you just have it on a surface. And this idea of the oceans warming below that water, warm water is causing all of our glaciers to melt from underneath. But there was also a positive result that came out of this. And that was that anybody who went through the piece had a very visceral sense that they were participating in the research. you're literally standing in the back of a plane next to a toilet as a guy's dropping a thermometer inside a tube down out the back, a hole out the back of the plane. And anybody could imagine themselves doing that. And I think it really helped demystify the science. It really helped people understand these aren't just, folks in cubby holes making up their data. And that ability to understand what the research was, I think really helped demystify the ideas around climate change.
Shall we look at the trailer?
Sure, please. Thank you.
Well, when you look at the glacier like that, from the vantage point of an helicopter, it looks like it's going to be here forever. How could it possibly go away?
The glacier retreated more in the last 15 years than in the previous 70 years. We'd like to know why.
Three, two, one, drop.
So there's a interesting thing about the procedure of making this stuff, and then I'll pause from there. But we did photogrammetry of the actual airplanes and boats, et cetera, and then separately we had to record the scientists on a stage in Los Angeles and using videogrammetry. And that NASA guy in the back of the plane was like, "I'm wearing my jumpsuit," and there was a real back and forth about what's ethical. He's in a studio, a stage in LA. Are we telling our viewers that we were actually filming him on the airplane by showing him in his jumpsuit? And there was a question like, shouldn't he just be in regular clothes? And ultimately, he was like, I would never appear in my plane not in my jumpsuit. So we filmed him in the jumpsuit. But it's a very interesting question of, what is B-roll in these type of situations, right? What are we going to show that isn't actually factually a part of what's been captured and yet still remains factually accurate? So I'll leave it on that note.
Yeah, fascinating how when we're creating such synthesized media, the ethical implications for journalism and for our audiences. It's really, really fascinating. We'll get back to that. That's great. Thank you. Next up, we're going to go to The Tree, which is a VR project that allows its participants to become a tree in the rainforest, from seed to a full-grown giant. It also released in 2017. We're joined by the co-directors Winslow Porter and Milica Zik. Winslow is Brooklyn-based, director, producer, and creative technologist, and Milica is not in Belgrade, as usual, but in Florida today, an artist, filmmaker, and now a PhD candidate in the Netherlands. So great to have you both here. Tell us about The Tree.
Thanks for having us. So Tree is a VR experience in which you actually get to embody a rainforest tree. It starts, you first are a small tiny seed underneath the ground. So when you look at your body, you're a seed. When the experience starts, you start growing, piercing through the ground, and your body transforms into a trunk, and your arms become branches of a tree. So as you're moving yourself, you're in full control of a tree. You're enjoying your life. Birds and butterflies are flying around you. You can interact with sloths, monkeys. And then after like 7 minutes of this almost like a symphony of the nature, you actually reach the full height. So we kind of condensed 100 years of a tree's growth into 7 minutes. But once you reach the fullest height and you can see the beauty of the entire rainforest, that's the moment when humans come and start burning it and taking it all away from you. So for us, this was a way to personalize the topic of deforestation, which is probably very remote for a lot of us, being in the rainforest or living nearby. So we wanted kind of to transport you there into the body of a tree so you can hopefully empathize, in this case with nature, and start maybe caring in a different way about this topic. To do this, we also added some haptic elements. Maybe Winston want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about VR is that we can transport not just your eyes and your ears, but in location-based experiences where we're able to set up multi-sensory like elements. For us, it was important to also be able to transport your not just your eyes and ears, but your sense of smell, your sense of touch, because those are the things that we've relied to, as humans evolving to be able to survive. We trust our senses, and if it's done in the right way, not only is there a symphony of nature, but also a symphony of the haptics interacting with what you see and hear and smell and touch. And that's really important, especially the sense of smell, because we don't even intellectualize sense. We immediately convert them into feelings, and then they get transmitted, or if we smell those again, we remember them, less of an image, more of a feeling, of a memory. So for us, that was really important, so that people can embody the tree, with their arms as branches, but also then having those elements that, obviously you can't be a tree, but when people put the headset on, they're taken there, and they don't really question it, because of, we spent a lot of time making sure that it was just right. If this scent is too powerful, when you're underground, as you'll see in the video, which you'll just play, we have this really amazing scent of like a wet soil. And for me specifically, whenever I smell that, regardless of where I am, regardless of how many times I've smelt it, it reminds me of being in the garden with my grandmother when I was growing up. A really authentic wet smell of putting my hands in the soil. So that was already a connection that I had to nature, and everyone has their own connections. And so it's important that we also meet the viewer halfway. We don't sort of bombard them with, a voiceover or telling them how to feel a certain way. Instead, we construct a narrative where they can provide their own imagination and own experiences to sort of scaffold around it and build a more solid foundation for which they can experience it and remember it as well. Not just be there for the 7 minutes, but our goal is to be able to create a lasting impact for many years to come.
Beautiful. Well, we can't experience the scent on Zoom, but we can share the trailer. So we'll just do that now. Beautiful. Thank you. Do you have anything else to say about it, or?
Well, I think for the sake of this, it makes sense to tell the whole story. But even after you know it, and you put the headset on, you sort of forget it, because once you're in VR, even after you look at something on a 2D screen, it's very different to be able to navigate it with your own eyes and ears and all the senses. So, we prefer not to spoil it too much, but even with knowing what the final outcome is, it feels very fresh once you're able to inhabit or embody that organism. It feels totally different, but also familiar, because we're using, people are used to being able to navigate things with their hands, with their eyes. And so we wanted to make that as intuitive as possible. And every time somebody watches it, it's very different. It doesn't, even after showing it for over 4 years now, it still doesn't get old watching people experience it for the first time, especially with those different scent elements. So it's, and the piece continues to be, even more relevant than when we first started it. And for us, as as creators of things inside of virtual augmented reality, that's really important to be able to have that connection with the audience.
I love comparing the experience to the scent of earth and how it both gives you a memory and also gives you a new experience of that memory every time you do it. So thank you. That's wonderful. More on that soon. Now we're going to move to Vanessa to talk about a project that you have currently in development, 2100, a dystopian Utopia, the city after climate change. It's a multiplayer online role-playing game, and it's based on the visionary 2017 book of the same name. We're joined by the creator and the author of the book, Vanessa, who is the principal at Studioteca and a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, Weitzman School of Design. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and it's great to be in such wonderful company. I guess I could start by saying that I'm a Jamaican. So I'm from a place that is extremely climate impacted. Our house is close to the water, and I spend a lot of time looking at it and wondering about hurricanes and tracking hurricanes, and then starting to think about how hurricanes are also impacting New York and other places that I love. And so this project really comes from the heart. It also comes out of a strong desire to do something. So if I, as a Jamaican, can spend years doing climate research on what we can actually do to solve this problem and emerge with any degree of optimism, I think anyone can. There's a tremendous amount of stuff out there that we've found. And what we've done is we've placed this into 14 cities around the world that we have really heavily researched. What will they be like at 4 degrees of warming? What are the challenges? How can we address them? How can we solve them with technologies and tools and techniques and ways of living that are different from what we have now, but that are also currently in development, so that they are actually feasible and plausible for the future, for, say, like being deployed 80 years from now? How could we also live differently? I think we're at a really interesting point in time in that we have the opportunity to really re-envision what it means to be a human being on this planet. That also means living more in concert and harmony with the natural world. As an architect, I like to say that we are sort of the anthill builders of our species, right? So, but no other species makes things that don't go back into the earth, right? So some of the questions that we've been asking with this project are around that, like, how could it be different? And how can I use the power of VR to put you into what I see and what I know to be true, in terms of we should be pushing towards this amazing future that we can develop for ourselves, instead of lamenting what we're losing. We're not actually, this isn't working. This isn't great. We have a lot to look forward to if we just sort of all kind of move towards a really, much more positive and better future. And so that's what we're trying to do with this game, is to really jump people into that and give them a sense of agency.
Shall we show the trailer?
Sure.
Welcome. You've arrived in New York City. I'm Violet, your AI companion. You're just in time. The city is preparing for an oncoming storm. You can help by completing climate quests. For each quest you complete, you're rewarded with points and expertise. You must close the storm surge barriers to protect the underwater turbines and energy park from being damaged. In your phone, you'll find your contacts and the map, which you'll need to navigate. Find shelter. The storm is here. The energy we captured from the storm can now power our city. There's a path for everyone. As an explorer, you chase storms, helping our cities prepare. As a destroyer, you're helping to recycle the old city. As a creator, you're designing solutions to ensure our survival. All this hard work has changed our cities dramatically. We must use all the space we have to collect water, grow food, generate clean energy, and capture carbon. With expertise, you're able to lead others, design new tools and technology, and travel to cities all over the world. At the marketplace, you can make purchases with your points, or sell anything you grow, build, or scavenge. Keep an eye out for poachers. If you catch them in the act, all their points will be yours. You must get out and explore the cities. So what are you waiting for?
Thank you, Vanessa. Did you want to say anything else that we need to know about your project before we?
Well, I think we sort of envisioned different roles for people, that you could be a creator, a destroyer. A destroyer is somebody who's basically recycling the old cities. There's a lot that comes from my book in terms of where we can live at 4 degrees. We've got two kinds of cities. We've got compact megacities like Moscow, and we've got extraction cities that are much smaller settlements like New York, right? New York is not going to be a city of millions anymore at 4 degrees. It's not going to be possible to do that. So, so we've sort of looked at that. So creator, destroyer, explorer. Poachers are people who steal other people's energy, right? So everything is sort of centered around the reduction of carbon and all of these different types of ways. And that's how your point system is related. We're also thinking about time travel, which I think could be really fun, in the sense that I could be in a 2 degree world and I could go advise you in your 6 degree world about how to bring yourself back from the brink, right? So we could have multiple, different realities, alternate realities in each place as part of the storytelling and the experience.
So you've really been busy translating your book into this gameplay, which is just an incredible process.
We're also thinking about how we want to also have the climate quests be in game, but then also connect with real world action, people who are supporting NGOs, supporting people who are doing this work in the real world, or even sending people who are in teams from the game to go do things. And this is something that my family has been doing in Jamaica for 20 some years.
Yeah, we'll get to the impact, but I just want to start off with this notion of translating or moving from a known form of storytelling into these emergent ones. Nani, Winslow, and Milica, you're all, you have backgrounds in documentary linear filmmaking. What drew you to these emergent forms and modes, and what's different about them when you're creating them? And maybe we'll start with you, Nani.
So I came to first as a print journalist, was a correspondent for Newsweek, and then made a bunch of doc films. and actually ended up writing on staff on TV shows too. And all the way through, I felt like I wasn't really getting people to feel the story the way I wanted them to feel it. And then I read Howard Rheingold's book on virtual reality and slowly began to think about ways I could translate stories, the stories I wanted to work on, into these spatial experiences. The first thing I built was a virtual Guantanamo Bay prison in Second Life, early metaverse. And the point of that was that it was off limits to most citizens and press. We wanted to make an accessible one. I did it with digital artist Peggy Weil. And it was amazing. People just showed up from all over the world to come and check out this gizmo, right? And, we did this thing where we took control of your avatar and put you in the back of a C-17 transport plane, et cetera. It's experiential. But, it's amazing that Gitmo's still open, and that's, at the time, I was often accused of doing advocacy journalism, but people wouldn't say that anymore. And after I made the piece, I was like, oh, we could use this kind of technology for all kinds of nonfiction and non-gaming storytelling. And that led my career. And ultimately, then the first piece I built, it was really the second piece, but the piece that's best known was that premiered. It was the first VR piece to premiere at Sundance Film Festival, was on hunger. It's called Hunger in Los Angeles. And then since then, I've just done many, many pieces in this new medium.
What about you, Winslow?
Unmuting. So yeah, I think that with VR, you can tell a lot in a little bit of time as well. Most of the experiences that we're talking about are anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. Vanessa, I'm not sure how long yours is. It seems like it's sort of, you can take more time because it's more of an open world. And that's great as well. But there's a sense of then you can take the time that you need. So it's very intimate in that regard. It's not just sort of like a one-way conversation, from 2D pixels that are just sight and sound. There's the sense of intimacy really can draw you in and then make you feel, more responsible for the, for action when you're done with it. And we also found that when we were showing people, we've shown a lot in DC and spoke to lobbyists and politicians. And I think that they also found that there's a certain amount of fatigue from watching a 2-hour documentary, whereas they also saw VR or AR, immersive media, as a totally new way to be able to draw people in, a new audience. And instead of, having to wait, oftentimes people are very busy, in their schedules, so they don't think that they have time. But if you put a headset on somebody and, you can do it in a much shorter period of time. But, and not to say that documentary can't do amazing things, but I just think it's a new opportunity to tell new stories in exciting ways. And there's no really right or wrong way to do it because it's so new. So that's what's also exciting, is trying to push the boundaries, not just of storytelling, but being able to leverage new technologies to do that. And if it's done right, you obviously don't want to make the viewer nauseated, which was kind of something that was very common in the early days. You have an amazing ability to make the participant, now the director, the editor, the camera person, and the protagonist, which is a pretty profound perspective change when it comes to media. And I think we're just getting started when it comes to the immersive nature, and really excited to see where journalism, where documentary filmmaking, where sort of the 2 points converge. And I think, we're just sort of in the very early days.
Thank you. Yeah. And Milica, you bring a great experience in performance art to this work as well. So I'd be curious to hear your reflections on both, moving from documentary filmmaking and from performance art into this particular space of emergent media.
Yeah. Winslow and I both, our background is in film. So we are definitely film lovers and watch so many documentaries, right? Like many other people we know about climate problems. And when we were making when we were ideating, we were just thinking, how do we push it a step further? Because we as humans usually care mainly about our immediate problems. So how do we make climate your immediate problem? In this case, deforestation. And also, so that's how we kind of landed on, well, you should become a tree. But yes, I did work with Marina Abramovich, the performance artist, for about 9 years at that time. And she created this iconic show in MoMA called The Artist is Present, where she was seated on the chair for 3 months, and the people could sit across from her, one after another. And the reason she did it is because in her whole 40-year career up to that point, usually she was just performing on her own and reaching transformation on the consciousness levels on her own. So what she realized, why don't she like bring in the audience and let them have this transformational experience with her or their own experience. So that's how the Artist is Present actually was conceived, with that idea, and kind of like bringing, you're becoming a protagonist, as you called at the beginning of this panel. You said active participants. Like, so from the audience, we're moving you to active participants, which both Noni and Vanessa, like in your work, like when you have agency, that's the most powerful, I think, way to feel empathy, to maybe feel transformation, and hopefully to contribute to the change afterwards.
Yeah, thanks. It's really, this is getting at the heart of co-creation and co-creative practices. So it's really exciting for me to hear how you're working. Vanessa, you told me, world building has been around for a long time. You know, these games have been, it's its own genre and it's own huge industry. But you mentioned that architects have rarely been in that space to actually build these places. Can you tell me a little bit about what architecture and your approach to world building is particular, especially as we're now moving into digital twinning, which is something else I'd love for you to tell us a bit more about.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm an architect and also an urban designer, and my publisher was Michael Sorkin, who unfortunately died at the beginning of the pandemic of COVID, but he was just an incredible visionary. He was somebody who I just feel so blessed to have known and to have been able to work with. And his idea for cities was, can we build cities that are more just, more equitable? He did a study called New York Steady State, where he was looking at, could New York City could we generate all of everything that we need here? Could we grow all of our food? Could we meet all of our energy needs? The answer was no, but they tried. And so I think one of the things about being an architect is we do work collaboratively all the time. We're not independent creators. We are with teams. We're very often the orchestra conductor, the person who has to take somebody's narrow slice of knowledge and be like, how does this fit into the whole, right? So working collaboratively is really important. One of the things I realized that was a source of just like, I can't believe how stupid we are. We're in all of these like silos, right? And so we're researching, we're like, oh my God, there's this amazing idea. Somebody over here needs to connect, and they're not connecting, either because they don't know about each other or because there's competition. And I'm like, we should not be competing on this. We should be helping each other. We really have to change the way that we are, thinking about this. We've got like 8 to 10 years left. I know they keep saying that, but really, really, and truly, now this is it. So as an architect, we're trained to envision, to go to a place that maybe is terrible and envision a potential future. So for this, and we're very, you see it in your head. And the point of frustration also with teaching is, how do you get the students to understand that? Well, now I've started using this at Columbia and Penn, and I just put a headset. I'm like, this is not great. You want to see it? Like, let's put you in there. And they're like, oh, that's too big. That's too small. So when we're designing, we're actually designing with a deep knowledge of architecture, of urban environments, and also of the idea that there can be a fusion. Why do we have to have this separation between nature and human, built environment? Why can't we have both? Why can't we be more like the termites and the ants and every other species on this planet that manages to kind of coexist with the natural world in a better way? And so that's one of the things that was really important to me in developing this, and also in giving people agency. When I give talks, so often people on Zoom will, like teenagers or 20-year-olds, will be messaging me and saying, I want to do something, but I don't feel like no one is listening and it's hopeless. There's nothing we can do. And that breaks me, because it's not true. And so I was thinking to myself, gaming is so great. There was somebody who worked for me who was a warlord in EVE Online. And he was like in his 20s. And he was like, yeah, there's like 6 people working for me in the game right now, right? And he was my intern. And I thought, how great that you can have this environment where somebody, it doesn't matter how old you are. and you can have that sense of agency and of the fact that you can actually solve this, because we really don't have a crisis of tools or techniques. We have a crisis of politics and a crisis of imagination.
And that really leads me to the next question about all of your projects are tied very profoundly to the climate justice movement. So can you tell me a little bit about the innovative ways in which you connected with people working in this in other ways, and what specifically your project contributed to that, to these campaigns, or continues to? Maybe we'll start with you, Winslow.
Sure. With this project, we knew that, as filmmakers, as creative technologists, people who are really curious to be able to, use the emerging technology in new ways, that we needed to be able to partner with people who actually had boots on the ground, people who had experience, scientists, biologists, people who are familiar with how to connect with policymakers. So that's why we connected with the Rainforest Alliance, and they've actually been using this as a way. First, once it was a lot of collaboration and making sure that everything was just right. Vanessa, like you're saying, things being too big, too small, making sure that like all the flora and fauna were accurate to that area of Peru where the experience took place, but also in understanding, making sure that it would make sense for people who come from a different background. So really working closely with their team to make sure that the length was right and that each part had the ability to shine. So it felt like a full narrative arc. It wasn't just, facts about climate change and roll credits. It really bringing people in. That was super important, so that it actually, it represents a place that actually exists in the real world, not just a virtual environment that we created in Unreal. And then since then, we have been able to collaborate with a lot of other NGOs, and we've shown it with the World Economic Forum with 4 different events, 2 of them in Davos. And for us, that was really the opportunity to be able to show it to people who are heads of state and heads of large corporations, and get them to you could see as soon as they took the headset off that the wheels were turning, and that they wanted to be able to show this to other people. Just like the metaphor of planting a seed, that's very much what we've experienced with Tree, is that once we show one person, then they want to show it to somebody else. And in these events, after a few days, a lot of people are coming to us and wanting to collaborate on projects, because this is just one of many stories that can be told. And I think that, again, people see the power of this new medium to be able to really change people's perspectives. And it's oftentimes very difficult to understand what the metrics are. And I think that we can also get too caught up in making sure that there's a one-to-one relationship with creating a project and being able to create, change or impact from it. But I think that it's really about, having as many people create these projects as possible, and be able to also get people who are used to playing Fortnite, who are familiar with the Unreal Engine, to be able to use that for, not just running around and be able to participate in cartoon violence. There's so many other things that these game engines can do. So for us, we're really interested in working with other people to tell, these stories in new and interesting ways.
What I'm hearing from you, Winslow, as well, is that, the relationship that you have with the movement comes at the beginning of your design process. It's not like you've made this thing and then go find partners to market the project or to fit into a campaign that already runs. You really deep co-design up front.
Yeah, we worked with over 100 different individuals, artists, engineers, everything in between, to create the project, and a lot of different NGOs. And so for us, that was really important to also, be able to talk about that relationship. It was, for lack of a better word, a very organic partnership with a lot of them. Oftentimes no money was exchanged. It was a very symbiotic relationship. And, we want to be able to have this project to be shown in as many places as possible. So, VR is still rather exclusive when it comes to the ability to witness it. The technology is getting, more expensive and more, integrated into our culture, but it still has a long way to go. And I actually worry a little bit about sort of the commodification of it when we think about the metaverse, which we might get to in this, but more as like a way for commerce. But it should really be a way of connecting people and be able to share stories. And yeah, with this project, we had an idea of what we wanted, but we definitely, especially when you put the headset on, realize that there's so many different choices that you can make. So working with all these different partners definitely helped us focus in on what it could be at the end. And the beauty of these game engines, as opposed to, say, a documentary where you lock picture, you release it and it's done, we can keep, implementing new versions of the engine to make the lighting look more realistic, to make the sounds more immersive. So it's evolving, which is really nice. And we can keep making it so that this experience can, live on for future headsets 10, 20 years into the future with even more, with better resolution and more immersive elements. So for us, it's really an understanding of where can we take it, once we started in this one place, and building a strong foundation as a company, but also, in a project to see where else this can plug in, because it's science, tech, entertainment, art, the idea of policy change. There's so many different places that we intersect. And I think that we're seeing that, as these reports come out with the Guardian one, what you just said, we're getting asked by a lot more people, because I think people are starting to wake up more and sort of realize the power of this technology.
Melissa, do you have anything to add with specifically the relationship to the movement?
Yeah, I think what was in our case interesting was that Rainforest Alliance, our initial NGO partner, we actually invited them to collaborate with us. And I think maybe usually the case is that NGOs invite creators to make stuff. And I think maybe the advantage of us inviting them was that we preserved our own creative freedom entirely, because we initiated the project, but they were there to guide us and advise us. But Tree was never meant to be 100 million% accurately scientific depiction of the, we kind of did rely on science, but also wanted to have our own freedom. As I mentioned earlier, like 100 years condensed in 7 minutes. So for us, the main goal was like, how do we evoke emotions? How do we make the most powerful piece? That was at the forefront. So I would say maybe if this panel is watched by some young artists or creators, like you can take this matter in your own hands. You don't need to wait that someone calls you or invites you to make a project. You can go on and make it, but it's always a good advice to maybe have partnership with, or to ask scientists or biologists to be your advisors, because maybe that's not your specialty. So it's kind of good to have people from different skills to make these kind of climate projects.
Thank you. Vanessa, do you want to speak briefly about your connections to the movement, to movement builders?
Sure. I mean, I started off before I became an architect. I started off at the School of International Affairs at Columbia, and I studied economic and political development, right? So one of the things that was, I went to work in the slums in Egypt with the Zabaleen population. I've worked in slums in Venezuela. So I've done like a lot of, project work in the global South, right, with communities that are heavily climate impacted. And, also as a Jamaican, this is something that's really been at the forefront of my thinking. And so it's really great for me that I've actually now been able to connect these two interests, because I originally went to architecture school because I wanted to have a technical skill to bring to my, development work, right, in the global South. So as far as, one of the things that we're thinking very much is that we want to have climate quests that are used in game to generate awareness, but that we also want these things to be in person. So we don't know whether we're going to do this through the sale of NFTs, or if we're going to do this through having a certain amount of points or an app, or so, we're still sort of bouncing that around, but we really want to be able to have people go and do actual work in the global South. For example, my parents have a program that's a study abroad program that's been in operation for some 20 years, where we take students from American universities and they go and they spend 6 weeks in Jamaica, and they work with Rural Agricultural Development Authority and other groups doing projects that benefit those communities. So that's something that I bring to this that's probably maybe a little bit different from other architects. The other thing that I want to emphasize is that what we're envisioning in the book and in the game is a world without poverty, is a world without inequality. My publisher actually he told me to tone it down, which I thought was kind of funny. So I was like, all right, well, I won't talk about that stuff, but I think it's okay to talk about it now, because I think things have evolved and we don't have to be afraid of speaking our minds, and things are really urgent, but we need to figure out how to share if we are going to go to a 4-degree world, which we might even go worse than that, we're not going to be able to have as much land mass as we have now. So how are we going to, so we started quantifying that, like how are we going to live? How's this going to work? There's no McMansions anymore. There's no, we need to have like shared spaces. So that building that you see, it's got like solar, there's this thing called the low line, and sun comes actually into the building, so we can have farming inside the building. So you can have nature inside the building and nature outside the building and nature going on the building. So we have to combine everything. We have to have everything has to be doing more than one thing.
I really appreciate that you're building in the activism into the game, the very gameplay of the world that you're creating. That's really awesome. And it leads me to the incredible work that both Nani, the two projects that are completed now, have done in terms of studying the impact of the work on audiences. Nani, your project was the subject of an incredible study about the impact of VR on audiences, and yours as well, The Tree. But in particular, Milica, you're actually studying this for your PhD, I believe, comparing and understanding the differences that audiences experience across different platforms and different multisensory work. Could you comment a little bit, Nani, about what surprised you in the study that was conducted about Greenland melting?
I think the biggest surprise is the fact that, well, I mean, I think surprise is probably the wrong word, but what was the outcome of the difference between watching something on a flat television screen versus actually being in the scene? And I think that's why we've all sort of dedicated ourselves to this ability for agency for our participant or our viewer, is how significant it can feel. And so in the study, we looked at just a regular flat screen, 360 video version and actual walk around version. And the version that lets you move your body through the space, like we, the way that we operate in our everyday lives, was indeed the most impactful. And I'm sure that's not, surprising to hear that. I just have to also go back and say, gosh, I wish I had Vanessa in my neighborhood right now helping design as I'm watching. And I, if only I could get the developers who are ripping down the trees around my streets to do Winslow and Milica's piece, because there is, to me, that's the hopelessness right now, or the helplessness, and I feel like if we could share our work and continuously get people to look at it, maybe we can even affect a little bit of change. And for somebody to look at this kind of stuff and say, oh, VR, it doesn't have enough outreach, doesn't have enough audience or distribution. But when you look at how impactful it is, we need to cross that bridge. We need to get rid of that barrier, and I mean, given the fact that Apple has moved their top hardware guy onto the AR VR team, it's only a matter of time. But the issues that all of us are trying to address are so pressing. They're so pressing. And it's so difficult to watch. It's just so difficult to watch. I sit there I know it's pathetic, but I'm sit there on my street, like screaming and crying as I watch them bulldoze another tree.
Yeah, and I think what I really took away from the study was that, while information may not be, the facts and the data may not translate as easily in VR, it's definitely not a magic bullet. It's about the emotional impact that this work has. And Milica, you're studying the impact of not just the VR, but also these multi-sensory experiences. Can you tell us where you're at with your PhD?
Yeah, currently a PhD candidate at the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development at Utrecht University in Netherlands. And I'm studying, I kind of just started like half a year ago. So my research is going to be around the intersection of gaming and environment. How can we use gaming or immersive technologies to really depict the climate problems and hopefully bridge that towards solutions. So one of the first studies I will be doing with teams is going to be actually the study around tree. And we will be comparing different conditions of tree, as Nani was mentioning. We will also be doing just tree, but on this computer screen versus full tree with all the haptics, and then maybe taking away the scent, the touch. We have this subpack, the vibrating backpack that vibrates as you're growing. So we will be comparing all these different conditions, what works, what doesn't, where is that difference, what is that kind of ingredient that makes you feel emotions. And also we'll be doing like qualitative and quantitative studies around all these conditions. So yeah, hopefully soon we'll have some results.
Oh, that's really exciting work. We have time, I think, for one last question. You're all trailblazing on this new frontier of climate storytelling. What's next? I've heard you say metaverse, NFTs, but what do you see in terms of this genre? Vanessa, let's start with you.
Oh, wow. I mean, I do think the pandemic really accelerated, people taking up headsets and, using them in a way to connect with other people. And I think that social VR has really exploded. I mean, not without problems. I mean, there's harassment and Horizon Worlds and other things like that people have to contend with. But I do think that the cost of a headset is going to go down. I think right now, I mean, as we're looking at it, we really think that it still makes sense to do this for PC and phone as well. Also, just because it's more inclusive. We really want people in the global South to be able to access this. We want as many people to be able to access it as possible. But I do think that that things are really moving forward very quickly with these technologies. Of course, like anything else, it starts out as revolutionary, and the danger is, does it turn into cat videos and advertising and porn? Hopefully not. But I do think, what the others have said about the tremendous power of this medium can't be understated. I mean, even as your mind is telling you that even if you hear the sound in the room around you and you know that you're in your office, you still get vertigo, right? The first time I went in headset was in 2016, and the Glimpse group came to my office and they brought this button jump thing where you press a button and you go up, and they asked if you want to jump down, and people fell, even though they knew they were in an office. I don't know if you guys have done The Key, but The Key is another, it's about refugees. I got to the point where there was the growling monster over you. I had to get out of my headset. I was like, what's wrong with you, Vanessa? But like, I was afraid because I didn't know if this thing was, and it's a cartoon, but it's larger than you and you don't know what it's going to do. And everything in you, and this isn't even with haptics. This is just with controllers and your vision. So it's only going to get more and more powerful. I think the thing that we have to be careful of is that power used for good, or is it used to be more seductive and more manipulative and, get you to buy stuff, right? Which is the sort of direction that our society always goes in. But I'm an optimist and I have hope.
Thank you. Milica, what about you? What do you see coming for climate storytelling?
Yeah, I agree with you, Vanessa, on all your points. Yeah, there will be a danger, and there will be all sorts of different experiences always, just like with every other medium. But in terms of all this technology providing us an amazing tools really to talk about climate, and I think maybe the co-creation and collaboration are the keywords for me. In terms of, because that's something we have to teach the users these habits, and we can teach them in this virtual gaming world so they can bring it into reality, into their worlds. So I think, and that's what's necessary to resolve climate, co-creation, collaboration, and as earlier mentioned. Yeah.
Wonderful. And Nani, what about you?
Well, one of the things that I hope that we can do also is, in much the way Vanessa was trying in this larger thing of ideating the future, I'd love for us to be offering people the ability to try out solutions for today. If we can give people an experience that lets them actually imagine very specific steps that they can take, maybe we can take advantage of the way that embodied training can be so successful, and get people to actually start acting on what are some of the premises and promises. Some are larger and some are smaller, but I'd love to see us activate whatever we can.
Winslow, how do game engines play into what Nani just talked about? Game engines aren't just for games anymore.
No, and I think that they're becoming much easier to use. Before, you sort of had to have like a PhD in engineering to figure out how these things work. But now they're very visual. They're almost like being able to use Final Cut or like After Effects. You can do them on a timeline. You can be able to pull in assets, either that are bought or you can create using your phone. You can scan assets, and so we're able to actually capture, our own surroundings or, that of somebody else. Somebody can send things through easily through different versioning control software. The ecosystems are incredibly robust now for collaboration. And so I think that we're seeing that, just something that was before, something that we just get text messages, through on our, this device can actually be able to create things with us. And the fact that they're not just pre-rendered graphics, but they're real time, they're happening in front of you, and they feel like, that they're alive, or the environments are alive, and the people that are there with you are also present, even though it's a virtual world. I think that we're going to see a lot of things, incredible new steps for these types of entertainment or experiences, not just being able to be created at a desk and think about it, but how can we actually create these experiences inside these virtual worlds? How can we have the building blocks? Like, exactly.
Yeah, it's
so, Minecraft, you can build stuff in Minecraft.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But these 3D tools, not just creating in 3D, but, not just creating for 3D, but inside, in 3D itself. I think that's going to change things a lot.
Thank you.
Dissolving, boundaries. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. This is, we've run out of time. Sad to leave you all. This is a great discussion. And we are so thankful to you all, to the panelists, Nani, Vanessa, Milica, and Winslow, and to all of you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.